Blood spattered across the weathered floorboards of Holiday's saloon as Rowan Nichols tumbled backward, his jaw throbbing from the unexpected punch that had sent him sprawling. Wyoming Territory, 1885, was unforgiving to men who couldn't keep their wits sharp and their reflexes sharper, especially in a mining boomtown like Silverton, where fortunes and lives changed hands with equal frequency. "That'll teach you to cheat at cards, cowboy," growled Emmett Davies, the burly miner whose meaty fist had just introduced itself to Rowan's face. The crowd of onlookers parted as Davies advanced, spurs jingling with each deliberate step. Rowan propped himself up on one elbow, tasting copper as he ran his tongue over his split lip. "I wasn't cheating," he said, voice steady despite the ringing in his ears. "Just because you don't understand how to play doesn't make me a cheat." Davies reached for the revolver at his hip. "I'll show you understanding." "That's enough, Mr. Davies." The voice cut through the tension like a blade through butter, confident, commanding, and unmistakably female. The sea of rough-hewn miners and cowboys parted to reveal a woman, standing in the entrance of the saloon. Violet Aldridge stood framed in the doorway, her chestnut hair pinned beneath a modest hat, her emerald traveling dress dusty from the road, but still finer than anything else in this frontier establishment. Despite the weariness in her eyes, she carried herself with the poise of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. "This isn't your business, madam," Davies said, though the hand on his gun faltered. "I'm making it my business," she replied, stepping further into the saloon. "I've just arrived in your town after 3 days in a stagecoach, and I'd prefer not to witness a murder before I've even had a chance to secure lodging." Rowan took advantage of the distraction to push himself up to his feet, swaying slightly. His hat had fallen nearby, and he reached down to retrieve it, keeping his eyes on Davies. "The lady's right," came the gravelly voice of the barkeeper. "Take it outside or take it nowhere, Davies." With a final menacing glare, Davies spat on the floor near Rowan's boots. "This ain't over, Nichols." The crowd gradually dispersed, conversations resuming as the prospect of bloodshed faded. Rowan brushed dust from his denim trousers and straightened his faded blue shirt, finally turning his attention to the woman who had interrupted what would likely have been his final card game. "Much obliged, madam," he said, placing his hat back on his head. "Though I reckon I could have handled it." Violet arched an eyebrow. "Is that what you call handling it? Because from where I was standing, you were about to become very dead, very quickly." A reluctant smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps not my finest moment." He extended a hand. "Rowan Nichols." "Violet Aldridge," she replied, briefly accepting his handshake with a gloved hand. "I'm looking for the hotel. I was told there's one in town." "There is, though calling it a hotel might be generous. More of a boarding house, really." Rowan glanced around the saloon. "I'd be happy to show you there, as thanks for your timely intervention." Violet hesitated, studying him with careful consideration. "Very well, Mr. Nichols, but I should warn you, I'm not easily impressed by cowboys who get themselves into trouble." Rowan's smile widened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Then it's fortunate I'm trying to impress you with my knowledge of local accommodations, not my card-playing skills." They stepped out into the harsh afternoon sunlight of Silverton's main street, a rutted dirt road lined with false-fronted buildings. The spring air carried the mingled scents of wood smoke, horse manure, and pine from the surrounding mountains. "Your luggage?" Rowan inquired, noting her empty hands. "Still on the stage. I wanted to secure a room first." They walked side by side, Rowan shortening his long strides to match her pace. "What brings you to Silverton, Miss Aldridge? We don't get many unaccompanied ladies traveling to these parts." Violet's expression remained carefully neutral. "My reasons are my own, Mr. Nichols." "Fair enough," Rowan conceded, tipping his hat to a passing townswoman. "Though I should warn you, folks around here are terrible gossips. If you don't provide a story, they'll invent one." "I'm a widow," she said after a moment's consideration. "I've come to claim some property left to me by my late husband." It wasn't the entire truth. Rowan could see that much in the tightness around her eyes, but he didn't press. Everyone in the West had secrets. Some were just fresher than others. "I'm sorry for your loss," he offered. They arrived at a 2-story clapboard building with Sullivan's Boarding House painted in fading letters above the door. Rowan held the door open, and Violet stepped inside, immediately engulfed by the aroma of baking bread and laundry soap. Mrs. Sullivan appeared from the back room, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. In her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, she regarded the newcomers with suspicion that melted when she recognized Rowan. "Mr. Nichols, haven't seen you in town for a spell. Been out with the herd?" "Yes, madam. Just got back yesterday." He gestured to Violet. "This is Miss Aldridge. She's looking for a room." Mrs. Sullivan's shrewd eyes assessed Violet. "Single women, $2 a week, meals included, no gentlemen callers after 8. No exceptions." "That sounds acceptable," Violet said, removing her gloves. "I'll need a room for at least a month." As Mrs. Sullivan fetched the guest register, Rowan leaned against the banister. "A month? Must be complicated property matters." "You have no idea," Violet murmured, signing her name with a flourish. "Well, if you need any assistance while you're in town, I'd be happy to help. I know Silverton and the surrounding areas better than most." Violet turned to face him, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Nichols, but I can manage my affairs." "I don't doubt it for a second," Rowan replied with a grin. "But everyone needs allies in a place like this." After arranging to have her luggage delivered from the stage office, Rowan tipped his hat in farewell. "I'm sure our paths will cross again, Miss Aldridge." Violet watched him leave, wondering if she'd made a mistake in engaging with a local so quickly. She'd come to Silverton with a purpose, and distractions, especially charming ones, with kind eyes and quick smiles, would only complicate matters. Still, as she followed Mrs. Sullivan up the narrow stairs to her room, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of gratitude for the cowboy's timely presence. The following morning found Violet at the land office, a small building tucked between the bank and the general store. The clerk, a balding man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, examined her documents with painstaking slowness. "These appear to be in order, Mrs. Aldridge, but there's a complication." Violet's heart sank. "What kind of complication?" "The Silver Creek property has been claimed by Blackridge Mining Company. They've filed paperwork stating they purchased it from your husband before his death." "That's impossible," Violet said, keeping her voice level despite the anger rising within her. "My husband never sold that land. He died before he could even develop it." The clerk adjusted his spectacles nervously. "Well, madam, I can only tell you what's in the records. You'll need to take it up with Mr. Hargrove. He's the Blackridge representative in town." Leaving the land office with her papers clutched tightly in her hand, Violet nearly collided with Rowan, who was exiting the general store with a sack of supplies. "Whoa there," he said, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. His smile faded as he noted her expression. "Something wrong?" "Nothing I can't handle," she replied automatically, then hesitated. "Do you know anything about Blackridge Mining Company?" Rowan's face darkened. "More than I'd like to. They've been buying up claims all over the territory, using methods that aren't always above board." He studied her face. "They causing you trouble?" "They've somehow managed to file a claim on my husband's land," Violet admitted. "Land that was never for sale." Rowan shifted his supplies to his other arm. "That sounds like Blackridge. Their representative here is a snake named Hargrove. Claims to have paperwork for everything, but half the town knows it's forged." "Can anything be done?" "Depends on how much proof you have and how much fight you're willing to put up." He hesitated. "Look, I was just heading to get some coffee." "Why don't you join me? I might be able to help." Violet found herself agreeing, following Rowan to a small cafe next to the telegraph office. Over coffee served in chipped mugs, she explained her situation more fully. "Thomas, my husband, discovered a silver vein in the hills north of town 3 years ago. He established a claim, but died of pneumonia before he could begin mining operations." She stirred her coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl. "I received word only recently. The lawyer who finally tracked me down in Boston said the claim could be valuable." Rowan listened attentively. "And you have the original claim papers?" "Yes, along with Thomas's will, leaving everything to me." She pulled the documents from her reticule, spreading them on the table. Rowan examined them carefully. "These look legitimate. But Blackridge has friends in high places, judges, territorial officials. They've been known to produce witnesses who will swear to just about anything for the right price." "So you're saying it's hopeless?" Violet asked, disappointment creeping into her voice. Not hopeless, just difficult. Rowan leaned forward. I worked as a deputy for a while before returning to ranching. I still have some connections in law enforcement. And more importantly, his eyes twinkled, I know where Hargrove keeps his records. Violet regarded him skeptically. Are you suggesting breaking the law, Mr. Nichols? Not breaking exactly. More like bending it in the direction of justice. He grinned. Besides, if they forged documents about your husband's land, the evidence would be in those records. Why would you help me? You barely know me. Rowan's expression turned serious. Let's just say I have my own reasons to want to see Blackridge's operations disrupted. Before Violet could press further, the cafe door swung open and a well-dressed man entered, followed by two rough-looking individuals. Rowan stiffened. Speak of the devil, he muttered. That's Hargrove. Hargrove, a sleek man with oiled hair and a waxed mustache, spotted them immediately. His gaze lingered on Violet before shifting to Rowan, recognition and displeasure crossing his features. Mr. Nichols, he said, approaching their table. I didn't realize you were back in town. His eyes flicked to the papers on the table. And making new acquaintances, I see. Mr. Hargrove, Rowan acknowledged coldly. This is Mrs. Aldridge. Ah, the widow, Hargrove said with a thin smile. I received word you might be coming. I'm sorry for your confusion regarding your late husband's property, but I assure you everything was handled legally. I find that difficult to believe, Violet replied, meeting his gaze steadily, especially since my husband never mentioned selling his claim. Hargrove's smile didn't waver. The transaction occurred shortly before his unfortunate passing. Perhaps he didn't have time to inform you. He glanced at Rowan. I'd be careful about the company you keep, Mrs. Aldridge. Some in this town have unreliable reputations. I'll be the judge of that, Violet said coolly. With a tip of his hat, Hargrove moved to another table, his men positioning themselves where they could watch Rowan and Violet. That went well, Rowan murmured, gathering the papers and returning them to Violet. Now he knows you're here and challenging his claim? Good, Violet said with unexpected firmness. I want him to know I'm not going to disappear quietly. Rowan studied her with newfound respect. You're not what I expected, Mrs. Aldridge. And what did you expect, Mr. Nichols? Not someone willing to take on Blackridge Mining single-handedly. He leaned back in his chair. What did you do in Boston? Before coming here, I mean. A ghost of a smile crossed Violet's face. I taught school, 3rd grade. Rowan's laughter drew curious glances from nearby tables, including Hargrove's. Remind me never to misbehave in your classroom. As they left the cafe, Violet was acutely aware of Hargrove's eyes following them. Outside, Rowan lowered his voice. Meet me at Sullivan's tonight after dinner. I have an idea about those records. Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and strode away, leaving Violet to wonder what exactly she was getting herself into. That evening, Violet paced her small room at Sullivan's, debating whether to meet Rowan. Getting involved with a near stranger in what sounded suspiciously like breaking and entering seemed foolhardy at best, criminal at worst. Yet, without those records, her claim to Thomas's land was in jeopardy. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Rowan, hat in hand, dressed in dark clothing. You're early, she said, stepping back to let him in. Mrs. Sullivan's rule about gentlemen callers apparently didn't extend to her room itself, just the hour. Change of plans, Rowan said in a low voice, closing the door behind him. Hargrove's men have been watching the boarding house. I think they're planning to intimidate you. Violet's heart raced. What do we do? We need to get those records tonight, before Hargrove has a chance to destroy anything incriminating. He hesitated. This is dangerous, Violet. I wouldn't blame you for backing out. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the unexpected intimacy of it made her pause. I came all this way for that land, Rowan. It's all I have left of Thomas. The look of determination on her face seemed to settle something for him. He nodded. All right, Hargrove's office is above the assay office. He keeps his records in a safe, but I know the combination a little gift from his former clerk who he cheated out of wages. Won't there be guards? One, usually. But tonight's Saturday fight night at McGinty's Arena. Every rough character in town will be there, including Hargrove's usual muscle. They waited until full dark before slipping out through the kitchen door at the back of Sullivan's. The spring night was cold, stars pricking the black velvet sky as they moved through alleyways and shadows, avoiding the pools of lamplight that spilled from saloon windows. Silverton at night was a different world, rowdier, more dangerous, with piano music and raucous laughter pouring from establishments that catered to miners and cowboys spending their hard-earned pay. Violet kept close to Rowan, grateful for his steady presence as they navigated the darkness. The assay office was dark and locked, but Rowan produced a set of slim metal tools from his pocket. "Another skill from my deputy days," he explained, working on the back door lock. Inside, they crept up a narrow staircase to Hargrove's office. As predicted, no guard was present. Rowan went straight to the painting behind the desk, a garish landscape of purple mountains, and swung it aside to reveal a small safe. "Keep watch at the window," he whispered to Violet as he began turning the dial, ear pressed against the metal. Violet positioned herself where she could see the street below while staying hidden from view. Her heart hammered in her chest, each creak of the floorboards sending a jolt of panic through her. "Got it!" Rowan's triumphant whisper drew her attention. He swung the safe door open and began rifling through papers, holding them close to the moonlight streaming through the window. Minutes stretched like hours as he searched, Violet growing more tense with each passing moment. Finally, Rowan let out a soft exclamation. "Here it is, a letter from Blackridge's headquarters instructing Hargrove to secure your husband's claim by any means necessary, dated a month after Thomas died." He folded it carefully. "And here's the so-called bill of sale, with a signature that doesn't match the one on your documents." Violet moved to look at the papers, relief washing over her. "This proves they forged the documents. It should be enough to take to Judge Wilson. He's one of the few officials Blackridge hasn't bought yet." A noise from the street drew Violet's attention back to the window. "Someone's coming," she whispered urgently. Through the glass, she could make out Hargrove and his 2 men approaching the building, their conversation carrying clearly in the night air. "Check the back, too," Hargrove was saying. "Sullivan said she left with Nichols over an hour ago." Rowan quickly returned the remaining papers to the safe, spinning the dial to lock it and replace the painting. "We need to go. Now." They hurried down the stairs, but the sound of a key in the front door sent them retreating back up. Trapped, they pressed themselves into the shadows of the hallway as footsteps entered below. "Check upstairs," came Hargrove's voice. "I want to make sure those papers are secure." Rowan pulled Violet into a small storage closet just as heavy boots started up the stairs. In the pitch darkness, they stood pressed against each other, barely breathing as the footsteps passed their hiding place and continued to the office. "There's a window in here that leads to the roof," Rowan whispered against her ear. "We can make it to the next building if we're careful." He fumbled in the dark, finding the small window and working it open. Cool night air rushed in as he helped Violet climb through first, then followed her onto the sloped roof. They crept along the edge, Violet's heart in her throat, as loose shingles shifted beneath their feet. Below, they could hear shouts as their escape was discovered. "This way!" Rowan guided her to where the assay office roof nearly touched the adjacent general store. "We'll have to jump." It wasn't far, 3 feet at most, but in the darkness, with men searching for them below, it seemed like a chasm. Rowan went first, landing softly on the neighboring roof and turning to hold out his hands. "I've got you," he promised. Violet gathered her skirts and leaped, Rowan's strong hands catching her and pulling her safely onto the roof. They made their way across to a ladder at the back of the store, descending into an alley just as angry voices filled the street. "Come on!" Rowan urged, taking her hand and leading her through a maze of back alleys and service passages she hadn't known existed. They ended up at the edge of town, near a small creek that gurgled peacefully, seemingly unaware of their predicament. "We can't go back to Sullivan's," Rowan said, breathing hard. "They'll be watching it." "Where can we go?" Rowan hesitated. "I have a cabin, about 2 miles outside of town. It's not much, but it's safe." Under different circumstances, Violet might have refused to accompany a man she barely knew to a remote cabin. But with Hargrove's men searching the town and the incriminating evidence burning a hole in Rowan's pocket, she found herself nodding. "Lead the way." They walked in silence through pine forests silvered by moonlight, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional call of a night bird. After about an hour, they reached a small clearing where a sturdy log cabin stood, its windows dark. "Home, sweet home," Rowan said, unlocking the door and lighting a lamp. The cabin was simple but neat, a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and doors leading to what Violet presumed were bedrooms. Hunting rifles hung on one wall, and bookshelves lined another, surprisingly full for a cowboy's residence. Rowan stoked the fire and put a kettle on the small stove. "You can take the bedroom. I'll sleep out here." "Thank you," Violet said, suddenly aware of how improper their situation was. "For everything. You've risked a lot to help me." Rowan handed her a steaming mug of tea. "Like I said, I have my own reasons to want to see Blackridge taken down a peg." He settled into a chair by the fire. "My brother Owen had a claim near here. Good vein of silver, not spectacular, but enough to build a future on. Blackridge wanted it for access to neighboring land. When he wouldn't sell, there was an accident at his mine." Violet's hand flew to her mouth. "They killed him?" Nothing could be proven, but a support beam that had been solid the day before suddenly collapsed. Rowan's voice was flat, controlled. By the time they got him out, he was gone. Blackridge acquired the claim at auction a month later. "I'm so sorry," Violet said softly, understanding now his eagerness to help her. "It was 2 years ago." He set his mug down. "The papers we found tonight won't bring Owen back, but they might help stop Hargrove from doing the same to others." Violet found herself studying Rowan in the firelight, the strength in his weathered hands, the resolve in his blue eyes, the way sorrow had etched lines around his mouth that his easy smile couldn't quite erase. This wasn't just a cowboy looking for adventure. This was a man with principles, fighting for justice in a place where it was scarce. "We should get some rest," Rowan said, breaking the moment. "Tomorrow, we'll need to figure out how to get these papers to Judge Wilson without getting caught." Violet retired to the small bedroom, mind racing despite her exhaustion. In just 2 days, her quest to claim her husband's property had turned into something far more complicated and dangerous. And her feelings about Rowan Nichols were becoming complicated as well. She woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and the smell of coffee. Rowan was already up, frying bacon on the stove. "Morning," he said as she emerged from the bedroom, hair hastily pinned up. "Hope you slept all right." "Better than expected," she admitted, accepting a cup of coffee. "What's our plan?" Rowan slid a plate of bacon and biscuits toward her. "Judge Wilson holds court on Monday mornings. Today's Sunday. So, we need to lie low until tomorrow. Then we present our evidence before Hargrove realizes where we are." They spent the day at the cabin, Rowan showing Violet his small garden and the stream where he fished. They talked about their lives, her teaching in Boston, his years working cattle drives before settling on his modest ranch. It was strange how comfortable she felt with him, how quickly trust had developed between them. As evening approached, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "Why did you really come to Silverton, Violet?" Rowan asked quietly. "It can't just be about the land." Violet was silent for a long moment. "After Thomas died, I discovered we were nearly destitute. He had gambled away most of our savings." She twisted the plain gold band she still wore. "The claim was the only asset he left that might be worth something. Without it, I have nothing to return to in Boston except debts and pitying looks." Rowan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "So, this is about survival." "Partly," Violet admitted, "but it's also about not letting Thomas's last hope be stolen by men like Hargrove. He may not have been a perfect husband, but he deserved better than to have his legacy erased." The honesty between them felt as fragile and precious as spun glass. When Rowan's hand covered hers on the porch railing, Violet didn't pull away. Morning brought rain, turning the dirt roads to mud and providing perfect cover for their journey to town. They rode double on Rowan's horse, Violet seated behind him, arms wrapped around his waist as they navigated the slick trail. Judge Wilson's courthouse was a simple clapboard building near the center of town. They arrived just as he was opening for the day's business, slipping in the back entrance to avoid being seen from the street. The judge, a stern-faced man with a magnificent white beard, listened to their story with growing concern, examining the documents they provided. "This is serious evidence of fraud," he said finally. "I'll issue a warrant for Hargrove's arrest immediately and invalidate Blackridge's claim on the Aldridge property." He fixed them with a penetrating stare. You realize Blackridge won't take this lightly. They have powerful friends. We understand the risk, Rowan said, standing tall beside Violet. Very well. The judge began writing out the necessary papers. Wait here while I summon the sheriff. They sat in the judge's chambers, relief and apprehension mingling. Violet found herself reaching for Rowan's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. What will you do once the claim is officially yours? Rowan asked. I'm not sure, Violet admitted. I know nothing about mining. You could sell it. Many would pay good money for a proven silver claim. Or I could stay and learn. The words surprised her even as she spoke them. Silverton isn't what I expected, but there's something about this place. Rowan's eyes held hers. The town grows on you, he agreed softly. The door burst open before he could say more, but instead of the sheriff, Hargrove stood there, revolver in hand, 2 of his men behind him. I thought I might find you here, he snarled. Hand over those documents. Rowan stepped in front of Violet, shielding her with his body. It's too late, Hargrove. Judge Wilson has already invalidated your claim. Then I'll just have to make sure neither of you lives to testify about those forged papers. Hargrove raised his gun. I've dealt with troublesome claims before. The sound of a shotgun being cocked froze everyone in place. Sheriff Miller stood in the doorway, his weapon trained on Hargrove. Drop it, he ordered. You're under arrest, Hargrove. For a tense moment, it seemed Hargrove might risk a shot anyway. Then, slowly, he lowered his gun. This isn't over, he warned as the sheriff disarmed him. Blackridge has resources you can't imagine. Maybe, Sheriff Miller acknowledged, but they just lost their influence in this town. He nodded to Violet and Rowan. Judge filled me in. Brave thing you two did. As Hargrove was led away in handcuffs, Judge Wilson returned with the official paperwork confirming Violet's ownership of the Silver Creek claim. Congratulations, Mrs. Aldridge. The property is legally yours. Outside the courthouse, rain had given way to sunshine, steam rising from the muddy streets as the town went about its business, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. What now? Rowan asked as they walked toward the main street. I need to find somewhere to stay, Violet said. I imagine Mrs. Sullivan will have me back, now that the danger has passed. Rowan nodded, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Of course. I should check on my ranch anyway. I've been away longer than planned. They stood awkwardly on the boardwalk, the easy companionship of the past days suddenly uncertain. Thank you again, Rowan. For everything. Violet extended her hand formally. Rowan took it, but instead of shaking it, he held it gently. Violet, He hesitated. Would you consider having dinner with me tonight to celebrate your victory? Relief and something warmer flooded through her. I'd like that very much. That evening, they dined at the Grand Hotel, the finest establishment in Silverton, though its grandeur would have been considered modest in Boston. Violet had changed into her best dress, a midnight blue affair that brought out the silver flecks in her gray eyes. Rowan, cleaned up and dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best, couldn't take his eyes off her. You look beautiful, he said as they were seated. The evening passed in comfortable conversation, sharing a bottle of wine and stories from their lives. As they walked back to Sullivan's under a canopy of stars, Rowan offered his arm, and Violet took it without hesitation. At the boarding house steps, they paused, neither quite ready for the evening to end. I should probably check on the claim tomorrow, Violet said. See exactly what I've inherited. I could take you, Rowan offered. It's about an hour's ride from town. I'd appreciate that. In the silver moonlight, Rowan's expression turned serious. Violet, these past few days, I've come to care for you more than I expected to. Violet felt her heart quicken. I feel the same way. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, Rowan leaned down. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning, a whisper of possibility. Mrs. Sullivan's rules, Violet murmured against his lips. No gentlemen callers after 8, Rowan quoted with a smile. It's only 1:45. Their second kiss was deeper, more certain, full of promise and growing desire. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Until tomorrow, then, Rowan said, reluctantly stepping back. Until tomorrow, Violet agreed, her voice soft in the night air. The following morning dawned clear and bright, perfect for their ride to the Silver Creek claim. Rowan arrived with 2 horses, having borrowed one for Violet from a friend. As they rode out of town, Violet felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The mountains rose majestically around them, pine forests giving way to meadows bright with spring wildflowers. Whatever the future held, this moment riding beside Rowan under an endless blue sky felt right in a way nothing had since Thomas's death. The claim itself proved to be even more promising than they had hoped. The small mine entrance was still secure, and inside, veins of silver glinted in the rock walls when Rowan held up his lantern. "This is a good claim," he said, impressed. "With proper development, it could be quite profitable." Back outside in the sunshine, they sat by the creek sharing a simple lunch Rowan had packed. Violet trailed her fingers through the clear water, watching rainbow trout dart beneath the surface. "I've been thinking," she said carefully. "I don't want to sell this place." Rowan looked up, surprise, and what might have been hope in his eyes. No, I want to stay in Silverton, develop the mine properly." She took a deep breath. "But I know nothing about mining. I'd need a partner, someone who knows the land, someone I could trust." Rowan set down his sandwich. "Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mrs. Aldridge?" "Perhaps," Violet said, a smile playing at her lips. "For now." Rowan's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I'd be honored to be your partner, in whatever capacity you'll have me." Their gazes held, the air between them charged with possibilities neither had imagined when they first met in that rowdy saloon just days ago. 3 months later, Violet stood at the entrance of the newly operational Silver Creek mine, watching as the first cartload of ore was brought out. Rowan supervised the work, respected by the miners for his fair treatment and clear knowledge. The past months had been busy ones hiring workers, bringing in equipment, building proper supports and shafts. But they had also been filled with quiet evenings on the porch of Rowan's cabin, now their cabin, planning the future and learning each other's hearts. As the day's work concluded, Rowan found her watching the sunset from their favorite spot overlooking the valley. "Good haul today," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "The eastern vein is even richer than we thought." Violet leaned back against his chest. "I received a letter from Boston today. My old teaching position has been filled." "Any regrets?" Rowan asked, his chin resting on her head. Violet turned in his arms to face him. "Not one." The weeks turned to months, and the Silver Creek mine flourished under their management. Word of Hargrove's arrest and the evidence against Blackridge spread, emboldening other claim holders to come forward with similar stories. By winter, Blackridge Mining had withdrawn from Silverton entirely, their corrupt practices exposed. On a crisp December evening, with snow falling gently outside, Rowan knelt before Violet in their cabin and presented her with a simple silver ring, the metal mined from their own claim. "I love you, Violet Aldridge," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Tears shining in her eyes, Violet nodded. "Yes, Rowan, yes." Spring returned to the mountains, bringing with it their wedding day. The whole town turned out for the celebration, the small church overflowing with well-wishers. Judge Wilson himself performed the ceremony, pride evident in his face as he united the couple whose courage had helped clean up Silverton. At the reception held in the town square, music and laughter filled the air as townspeople danced and feasted. Rowan and Violet moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and sharing their happiness. As the evening wore on, Violet found herself in a quiet moment with Mrs. Sullivan, who had become something of a maternal figure to her. "Never thought I'd see the day Rowan Nichols settled down," the older woman commented, watching as Rowan laughed with Sheriff Miller across the square. "That man was as rootless as tumbleweed when you arrived." "People change," Violet said, twisting her new wedding ring. "Sometimes they just need the right reason." Later, as the celebration continued under lantern light, Rowan pulled Violet away from the crowd. "Let's go home," he whispered against her ear. They slipped away unnoticed, riding through the moonlit forest to their cabin. Inside, Rowan built up the fire, while Violet changed from her wedding dress into a simpler gown. When she returned to the main room, Rowan was standing by the fireplace, his expression tender as he gazed at her. "Mrs. Nichols," he said, testing the name on his tongue. "Mr. Nichols," she replied with a smile, crossing to him. He took her in his arms, and they swayed gently to music only they could hear. After a moment, Rowan attempted to lead her toward the bedroom, but Violet pressed a hand to his chest, stopping him. "Not yet," she said softly, a mischievous gleam in her eyes. Rowan raised an eyebrow. "No?" The cowboy tried to stand, until she pressed him back and said, "Not until I say so," Violet quoted with a smile, gently pushing him into his favorite armchair by the fire. Understanding dawned in Rowan's eyes, desire darkening them as Violet stood before him, illuminated by firelight. "And when might that be, Mrs. Nichols?" he asked, voice husky. Violet leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. "When I'm ready to show my husband exactly how much I love him." Their kiss was a promise fulfilled, the beginning of a lifetime together. In the wild beauty of the West, they had both come to cherish a love born of courage, forged in adversity, and destined to endure.